Fluttershy, she said incredulously. Fluttershy stepped up an inch from Pinky's face. Why were you terrorizing this poor creature? She demanded, not skipping a beat. Pinky almost flinched. It's not a creature, she said lamely. It's a cookie. I baked it and then it ran away. Fluttershy softened her tone slightly, glancing at the cookie that was now cowering behind her. Pinky, can't you see the poor thing is scared? She plaintively asked her friend. Clearly she does not want to be eaten. Pinky giggled. Silly Fluttershy, she said patronizingly. Cookies can't be scared. They're cookies. They're not alive. This one is just running away for some reason. She attempted to step around Fluttershy to continue her chase of the cookie, but Fluttershy matched her step. She was not going to back down on this. Pinky, if it was not alive, it would not be running away, Fluttershy said, or crying in terror. Illustrating the point behind Fluttershy, Kitty suddenly cried out in fear. The Pegasus pony whirled around to find the poor thing surrounded by hungry-looking possums. The creatures closed on her from every side like a pack of wolves. Fluttershy leapt to the gingerbread cookie's aid. Hey! She shouted at the possums, snatching the cookie up and sending the possums back into their mock death spasms. Leave her alone. You know full well I don't like it when my animals act like bullies. Or did you all forget what I told Mr. Coyote last night, when he thought he was going to snack on one of you? The possums looked a little abashed as they came out of their dead playing. Clearly they were sorry for picking on the walking cookie. Fluttershy held the cookie protectively. Are you all right, little one? She asked. Kitty looked up at Fluttershy with huge, terrified eyes. Kitty thinks so, she said softly. Fluttershy's eyes widened. You can talk? She exclaimed. Kitty nodded. A little, she said. Kitty's still learning. Fluttershy smiled at her. That is amazing, she said, and then turned to Pinky. See? She can talk. That clearly means she is alive. Pinky sighed. Fluttershy, she tried to explain calmly. It's a cookie. Cookies can't be alive. They're cookies. Now give me back my cookie. Mr. and Mrs. Cake gave me that dough to make a cookie out of it, and I'm going to eat it. Fluttershy could hardly believe her ears. She is clearly alive, she said. She walks and talks, and she says she does not want to be eaten. So I am not going to let you eat her. The two of them stared at each other for a long moment. Hey guys, what's up? Twilight Sparkle trotted over, sensing the tension between her friends. Pinky turned to Twilight and spoke first. Twilight, she said. Fluttershy took my cookie and won't give it back. Twilight raised an eyebrow and looked at her other friend. Fluttershy? She asked. Fluttershy held up the gingerbread cookie. This cookie is alive, she said. She does not want to be eaten. Right, Kitty? Kitty looked at Twilight. Kitty is alive, she stated. Kitty doesn't want to be eaten. Twilight stared at the cookie for a long moment, and then she turned back to Pinky. And why do you want to eat this cookie even though it appears to be alive and sentient? She asked. Pinky stared at her. It is a cookie, she explained. It can't be alive. Cookies are made of dough, not flesh like ponies. It's not possible for it to be alive. Twilight raised her eyebrow again. Well, it certainly seems to be alive to me, she said. Though I do find it surprising that you, of all people, are arguing from a stance of something that you can clearly see in front of you not being possible. Pinky looked at her, a slight twitch forming in her eye. Just because it can walk and talk doesn't make it alive, she said. You know, like the other Pinkies that came from the mirror pool. Twilight thought about that for a moment. You have a point there, she said. A magical construct could probably walk and talk. The only thing that stopped the mirror versions of you from being real was that they did not have your heart. They lacked your caring for those you love, thinking only of their own fun. They could not worry about the possibility of not being with their friends because they were too busy having fun on their own. Fluttershy stepped forward. So what does that mean for Kitty? She asked. How do we tell if she has a heart? Pinky grinned broadly, but there was something off about that grin. It doesn't, Pinky said. I baked it myself. No meat in there at all. Just dough. Give it to me. Kitty's face fell, but Fluttershy took a step back from Pinky. That can't be right, she said. She has a heart. She must have. Twilight looked at the cookie for a long moment. By heart, Pinky, I mean the metaphysical core that makes a pony a person, she said. Your heart is what makes you you. I guess there is a question I could ask that should give us an answer. Kitty looked at Twilight. What question? She asked. Twilight looked at her and nodded. Kitty, if you don't mind my asking, how do you feel? She asked. Kitty thought about it for a long moment. Kitty scared, she said. Kitty doesn't want to be eaten. She thought for a moment. Kitty also happy. Find one that will protect. Another pause. Kitty also sad. Miss sisters. Pinkie Pie flinched, and her hair deflated a small amount. Fluttershy turned to look at the cookie. Oh, you poor thing, she said, fussing over Kitty. Do you want to talk about it? Pinkie turned to Twilight, a slight tremble in her movements as she drew her friend aside. Twilight, she said, I need for that cookie to not be alive, Twilight. Do you understand? Twilight stared at her for a long moment. Pinkie, she said softly, what did you do? It was at this point that Fluttershy whirled, pure horror on her face. Pinkie Pie, she shouted. You ate her sisters? The thin veneer of calm that Pinkie had been struggling to maintain this whole time shattered, and she dissolved into tears. I didn't know, she cried, throwing herself to the ground in front of Kitty. I'm so sorry. I didn't know that you and your sisters were alive. If I had known, I never would have eaten them. I thought they were just ordinary cookies. Pinkie covered her eyes with her hooves and sobbed. Fluttershy looked at Twilight, and Twilight looked back. Neither of them were really sure what they could do to comfort their friend. Kitty was not really sure what to think. Then Twilight got an idea. Pinkie, did you eat all of the other cookies, or was there some left? She asked. Pinkie looked up from her sobbing and sniffled. Well, she said slowly, I broke the smallest one and then ate it. And I ate the middle one. But Kitty made me drop the third. It's still in pieces on the kitchen floor. Twilight smiled. Then how about if we check the remains of that cookie to see if it shows signs of having been alive? She asked, and then glanced at Kitty. We will be very respectful with the examination, and then, if you like, we can lay her to rest properly, whether she was alive or not. Kitty thought for a second, and then nodded. Kitty would like that, she said. Ginger closest to Kitty on Pan. Together the four of them went into the kitchen and found the remains of Ginger. They stood around her for a long moment, before Twilight began using her magic to pick up all the bits and pieces of the shattered cookie up off the floor and place them on the nearby cookie sheet. Carefully, she put the cookie back together, piece by piece, until it had formed into a cat less than a third of Kitty's size. Ginger was by no means as well decorated or as well sculpted as Kitty, but as Twilight checked the cookie over, it became very apparent that Pinkie had put a great deal of effort into making her. The detail was impressive, and she could tell that Pinkie had put a fair amount of love into the making. There was one other thing apparent, though. There was no evidence that this cookie had ever been anything more than it was now. Just a cookie. Twilight turned to the others. "I can't find anything to suggest that this cookie was ever alive," she said. She looked at Kitty. "I am sorry, but while I understand that you thought of them as family, I can't prove that they were ever really alive." Pinkie Pie sniffled and looked at Twilight. "So, I'm not a killer?" she asked. Twilight shook her head. "They were just ordinary cookies," she confirmed. "I don't know how Kitty is alive, but it would seem that she is the only one of the cookies that was." Pinkie Pie's hair poofed up a little bit, but she turned to Kitty, kneeling down to eye level with her. "Kitty, I'm so sorry for all that I put you through," she said sadly. "I was just so certain that if you were alive, maybe the others had been too. I was terrified that I had done something truly horrible. I think I did something almost as bad by saying you weren't alive. Can you ever forgive me?" Kitty looked at the pink pony, and then she looked back at her friend Fluttershy, who nodded. "Kitty can forgive Creator Pinkie," Kitty said. "Kitty think Pinkie family. Fluttershy and Twilight too, yes?" Everyone nodded and shared a hug. Dear Princess Celestia, life can change in the most unexpected ways. My new friend Kitty and I are now both working in Sugar Cube Corner, and boy were Mr. and Mrs. Cake surprised when they met her. We all love her, and she is a great help, and even one of the family now. Though she has to be kept away from Gummy and the babies, they just don't know any better. It is now standard practice to check to make sure that the food we bake here is not alive before we serve it. I think that you would approve. I learned that even in the worst of circumstances, a friend can be made, sometimes literally, with a little bit of effort and a lot of love, and friendships can be kept with exactly the same things. Well, I gotta go. Kitty is trying to make macaroons and I need to show her how. Sincerely, Pinkie Pie. That was Morality and Baked Goods by Sky Silverwing. While not all that long, this story does present a rather intriguing concept. In a world overflowing with potent magics, even some with unexpected consequences, how would that change one's concept of what constitutes a living being? We've seen all kinds of inanimate objects brought to life throughout the show, mostly due to Discord's chaotic magics, but how would you react when something you've never even considered sentient suddenly gets up and walks around? I may have to put together a video discussing these concepts, but I'm rather curious about what each of you think. Until next time, I am Dr. Wolf, and I look forward to hearing from you.